Hello everyone, welcome to yet another day in this, the Clown Decade, the decade where things are only going to get worse before they get better. And today, I'm afraid, it is going through yet another Tom Nicholas video. The video came out 4 days ago, it was brought to my attention by a subscriber. If you want to have the chance to bring my attention to things, either, at me on Twitter or join the Discords down below. But the video is called I Spent 24 Hours with Just Stop Oil. And what I find quite amazing about this video is that effectively it is Tom Nicholas recording his own crimes. As far as I'm concerned, from the little I've seen of the video so far, but don't worry, we'll go through the whole thing, Tom Nicholas probably deserves jail time. So, let's not waste any more time, let's get right into it. Take it away, Tom.
Okay, so I guess I need to do some explaining, and maybe some apologising.
Yeah, well, you will be sorry when hopefully you end up in jail, or at the very least this should go to court.
As the nice news presenter's just been saying, these two ladies over here, Sue and Judy, are Just Stop Oil protesters.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure one of them was a Church of England priest or something like that. And I suppose it's worth reminding everyone, basically the only two cohorts that are proper Just Stop Oil protesters are boomer 60s hippies that are obviously in their old age now and actually have the time to do this sort of thing, and idiot students or recent graduates. They are literally the only two cohorts that actually join Just Stop Oil, and obviously you have the odd middle-aged person who's having a bit of a midlife crisis, but overwhelmingly it is kids and boomers who get involved with Just Stop Oil.
Who are attempting to smash the glass surrounding Magna Carta, one of the most important documents in the history of Western democracy. And this gormless blob floating into shot, well, yeah, that's me. Sorry for spoiling the view.
No, it's alright, you won't be able to spoil the view again when in jail. I will get into detail over the course of this 1 hour video. I mean, obviously this is going to take 3 parts, as to exactly what crimes Tom Nicholas has been committing, but effectively, spoiler alert, conspiracy to cause a public nuisance and conspiracy to cause criminal damage. Effectively, if you know a crime is happening, and effectively you agree with the action or don't report that the crime is going to be committed, you are part of that conspiracy to cause an offence. And basically recording the criminal damage happening and doing nothing to stop it when you had prior knowledge of it, that effectively under law will say, yes, you agree with these actions, you are happy with these actions to go forward, you did nothing to stop these actions, you are part of the conspiracy to cause criminal damage. I mean, we'll get into detail a bit later, but because of that, Tom should at least see a courtroom.
This moment of symbolic criminal damage...
What do you mean symbolic criminal damage? It was just literal criminal damage. What are you talking about?
...was the adrenaline-filled high point of a tense 24 hours I spent in the company of the UK's most controversial climate protesters.
Once again, adrenaline-filled and intense. He knew that this crime was going to be committed. He is part of the conspiracy to cause criminal damage. He should see a courtroom.
My goal? To try and understand what drives campaigners to engage in this kind of action.
Oh, well, that one's easy. If you read the handbook, which I have actually done a video covering, you can see the link down below. Basically, it's because they are mental left-wing ideologues. There's literally little more to it than that, and as a famous tweet that I can't quite remember who made it once said, left-wing ideology is literally just dysgenic people being envious at the world and wanting revenge on it. Every bit of ideology surrounding that is just window dressing. And from what we can tell of Just Stop Oil protesters, yeah, that's exactly the type of person that do it. Who co-founded it? Roger Hallam. Why does he hate the world? Because he can't farm. Literally, he was the only farmer, organic farmer I should say, in South Wales, who failed 1 year with his harvest and somehow blamed it on climate change. The climate change that didn't affect other organic farmers in the country.
What it takes to pull off such a stunt, and whether or not attacking old documents is really likely to bring about a change in the government's climate policy.
I mean, I don't know what more change they'd want. But pretty much every party, apart from Reform, is dedicated to the net zero lunacy, and it is lunacy, by the way. We so far have halved our carbon emissions, and absolutely no one sees that as a cause to celebrate on the left, so even when you head towards their goal, they don't thank you for it, effectively. And in fact, as far as they can see, you've given them an inch and they want to take 10 miles. you know, they want decarbonisation now. They effectively want Green Party policy. Green Party are obviously rising in the polls. So, well, they actually went down a bit in the last poll, but, you know, they will definitely be taking the Labour voters in the future. And even then, even the most based Tory leadership candidate, Robert Jenrick, was going on about reaching net zero by 2050 still. Okay, he was giving a bit of red meat out to people like me, saying, oh, but we obviously still need some fossil fuels, but in any way being dedicated to net zero is complete lunacy. And yet everything Just Stop Oil does, effectively the government and most MPs are kowtowing to exactly what they want anyway. It clearly works, unfortunately.
Answering those questions has involved entering a world of encrypted messaging, code names, secret cameras, and endless arrests.
Yeah, and I hope they come and arrest you, to be quite frank. But, well, no doubt we'll have to be going into detail on two-tier policing a little bit later. There is no doubt in my mind he will bring up that people like Roger Hallam are in jail for 5 years, and I'm sure he'll say that's excessive, but you gotta kind of realise that it took multiple official warnings. He was out on probation. He had suspended sentences. The man clearly is constantly trying to get in jail and has been in jail in the past. And frankly, 5 years is still too short. The man is a serial criminal. The man should effectively be put away for life. And well, to be honest with you, with his age and the way he's going about it, he's going to come out of jail in, 2.5 years because he'll be released early. And he will instantly be committing crimes again. I guarantee it, because the man's mental.
It's involved speaking with a range of folks with various relationships to and thoughts about Just Stop Oil's activism.
See, if this video was just about interviewing people who are part of Just Stop Oil and not literally joining them for 24 hours to help commit a crime, I wouldn't be saying he should go to jail. But he helped Just Stop Oil commit a crime. He has to go to jail.
And it's required delving into some of the growing body of academic research surrounding why some political movements succeed in achieving their aims, whilst others fail.
I do absolutely love it when lefties bring up the suffragettes, because the suffragettes ended up joining the fascists in the end, so that's the first funny thing about it. 2, they keep saying it was a successful campaign. It wasn't. If anything, it stopped women's suffrage for quite some time because it was the perfect example to point at and say, look, women are mental. And in fact, what did end up giving women, and, well, most men, to be honest with you, universal suffrage was post-World War I. Obviously, a load of women were working in factories to help with the war effort. And effectively, the government said, you know what? We sent all your men to war. I think it's fair you all get a say now, because you are all probably going to be fighting and working for the state in a state of total war at some point again in the future. So we may as well just give you the vote. And the argument would have been very different if the suffragists were the only ones pushing for universal suffrage and women's suffrage. Again, suffragettes were complete terrorists. They were, frankly, a black mark on political movements in the UK. Again, they joined Oswald Mosley and the fascists, they set bombs off, they were quite literally terrorists, and for some reason now they're seen as the absolute best and perfectly legitimate protest group that the left apparently want to represent. But they don't actually do any of the radical stuff that these suffragettes did, because this is all vibes. The reason they like them is because feminism. That's the only reason they like the suffragettes. They don't have a clue what they actually did. All they're aware of is that some suffragettes were being force-fed while on hunger strike, and they completely ignore all the bombs. And Occupy Wall Street, well, that failed because they didn't really understand what their demands were. And so all the energy went from it and it just all fizzled out. I mean, it doesn't help as well that it was mostly middle-class kids who were actually relatively privileged who were on those marches. And they basically get bored and start wanting to find a job once, their parents stop fundraising their activism.
One caveat to all of this. Whilst this video is going to involve some debate surrounding the political tactics of Just Stop Oil, one thing is not up for question.
Oh, excellent. We're getting into the climate change debate quite early. What are you going to say, that the UN said climate change is real, therefore we all have to believe everything the UN says? Is that where we're going here?
According to the United Nations Environment Programme...
Oh, that is a top keck right there. These people are so predictable.
The planet we live on is presently on track to hit a devastating 2.9 degrees Celsius of global warming this century.
Right, so I've just Control F onto the Climate Change 2023 Synthesis Report from the IPCC, the UN's Climate Change Intergovernmental Panel, and there is absolutely no reference to a 2.9 degree Celsius temperature anywhere. Nowhere in this report does it say 2.9 degrees. And Tom just doesn't cite his sources, so I have absolutely no idea where he's got this from. So having a further Google, the UN's environmental programme has a page where it cites the 2.9 degrees, and here's what it actually says. As global temperatures and greenhouse gas emissions break records, thanks India and China, the latest emissions gap report from the UN Environmental Programme finds that current pledges under the Paris Agreement put the world on track for a 2.5 to 2.9 degree temperature rise above pre-industrial levels this century, points to the urgent need for increasing climate action. So, what Tom's effectively done here is given you the worst case scenario and effectively taken that as gospel truth. And an awful lot of lefties do this. They do this an awful lot. They will take the worst case scenario from some report and put the number in front of you and effectively say defend that. Which, to be fair, 2.5 degrees increase isn't great either. So let's take a look at this emissions gap report. So in the foreword of the report, written by the executive director, this again is just instant sensationalism. Humanity is breaking all the wrong records when it comes to climate change. Apart from Britain, by the way, halving our emissions is really good. Well, it should be to these people, I should say. Greenhouse gas emissions reached a new high in 2022. In September 20... Well, of course they would. In September 2023, global average temperatures were 1.8 degrees above pre-industrial levels. Pre-industrial levels, I want you to bear that phrase in mind, because actually you go to the next paragraph and that 2.9 degree figure comes up. The report finds that fully implementing and continuing mitigation efforts of unconditional, nationally determined contributions made under the Paris Agreement for 2030 will put the world on course for limiting temperature rise to 2.9 degrees this century. Fully implemented conditional NDCs would lower this to 2.5 degrees, given the intense climate impacts we are already seeing. Neither outcome is desirable. Now, the reason I wanted you to bear in mind the pre-industrial levels is because that is the temperature we're comparing it to. We are comparing it to temperatures that were measured, in the 16th, 17th century, something like that. Even 18th century, actually. And the Industrial Revolution was through the 19th century. And the problem with this is that, famously, we had quite a cool period known as the Little Ice Age throughout the pre-industrial period. But you go even further back, obviously you have a medieval warm period, and, with modern graphs as well of temperatures, they are rising. There's barely anyone on Earth who denies that. However, obviously, if you want to be sensationalist and not at all actually particularly interested in the science or fair comparisons behind this, you take the absolute lowest temperatures you can, as you can see, about -1 to the baseline they've chosen for this particular graph. And then obviously temperatures have only risen since, which is, partially to do with greenhouse emissions, partially to do with Milankovitch cycles, partially to do with other parts of nature causing it. As nature largely moved us from the medieval warm period to the Little Ice Age in the pre-industrial era. But this is the thing. Instead of comparing our particularly warm period now to another warm period, which we are going warmer then, fair enough, they're comparing it to an ice age, or Little Ice Age. We're still in an ice age, and that's not particularly good science. But Tom doesn't particularly care. Tom is taking this 2.9 degrees, which is comparing it to pre-industrial levels, and running with it, and saying, maybe Just Stop Oil have a point. And I think for that bad science alone, he should go to jail. And just to labour the point of how silly this report is, effectively what the difference between the 2.9 and 2.5 degree increase is do you go fully on board with the Paris Climate Agreement and everyone decarbonises, or do you carry on now and try and keep stagnation going as long as possible? And the thing is, the difference between these scenarios is ridiculous, because if you look here, the continuation of the unconditional NDC scenario lowers this estimate to 2.9 degrees, with a range from 2 to 3.7 degrees, whereas the additional achievement and continuation of conditional NDCs, effectively policies that help decarbonise, this lowers by around 0.4 degrees to 2.5. Right, so that's the average, but look at the range, 1.9 to 3.6 degrees. So actually all that effort puts the overall range down by 0.1 degrees Celsius, which is practically nothing. But they want to make it sound better, so they skew the average down a bit and say, look, it's a 0.4 degree cooler world. We'll stop global warming with this. I mean, effectively, yeah, I'm on the side of, well, what's the point? I'd rather we actually keep fossil fuels going so that we can improve our economies and hopefully actually start building nuclear reactors over the next 12 years or so we can start decarbonising when we have, a decent national grid with decent clean energy sources, aside from the nuclear waste, but that's a problem that we'll deal with when we come to it. And then effectively start dealing with the problems that the increase in temperature will create, which we're already doing plenty of. I've covered it in plenty of other videos on this channel. Sea defences, flood defences, plenty of stuff is being done. Bear in mind, by the way, the Maldives, which apparently is going to be underwater in 2 years or something, or probably should have been underwater 5 years ago, something like that. They've just finished building another airport. Nobody takes this climate change stuff seriously.
Such a world would be one of extreme, widespread and regular heat waves.
Well, thankfully with irrigation and modern technology, we actually have ways around this. I love it. I don't know why leftists always think that people around the world are completely helpless and too dumb to help themselves and deal with these problems. America used to have droughts in California constantly. They got around it. There's ways to deal with these problems.
One in which much of the Maldives, the Seychelles, Amsterdam and New Orleans have disappeared under rising seas.
I love how he brings up the Maldives after I instantly brought up the Maldives recently finishing a massive expansion to their airport. Seychelles is expanding its airport as well, by the way. Seychelles is revising its international airport master plan to include a new terminal, fixed-based operator for private flights and a modern duty-free shopping area, among others, said a top government official on Tuesday. Minister for Transport, Anthony Tidge, received the plans for an airport expansion when answering a question from the elected member of Point Laura District, Conrad Gabriel, in the National Assembly. With an increase in flights, the government has deemed it necessary to review the airport's master plan to put one in place that will take care of people for the coming 50 years. I mean, it's amazing how all these places that are going to be underwater 5 years ago keep building airports, keep making the climate crisis worse, keep increasing their emissions. It's like they don't really believe it. And by the way, because an awful lot of leftists seem to end up finding these videos, which I'm happy with, that's ad revenue, but a lot of them are probably going to say, you know nothing about the climate crisis, you know nothing about climate change. Yeah, I have a degree in this thing. This is the whole reason I started this YouTube channel, is because there was an awful lot of misinformation on this subject that I simply wanted to put right in people's heads. The problem effectively is that journalists don't really understand what they're talking about with this sort of thing and then sensationalise everything. And then obviously you have Just Stop Oil and types like that take this sensationalisation, which they love because they want it sensationalised, and then pick it up and run with it and then use it as an excuse to commit a whole bunch of crime to end up getting the change they want, which again has basically nothing to do with actually saving anyone, but has everything to do with effectively causing what is mass genocide, because if we decarbonise, you are definitely going to get blackouts. You definitely have your blackouts. You effectively kill an awful lot of people who, rely on electricity and gas to stay alive. The elderly, they kind of rely on being warm in winter. Farming and food supply chains, an awful lot of oil, gas and electricity is needed to, feed you. But ultimately, this is the plan. They want degrowth. You can't have degrowth without degrowing the population. They say all this in their handbook. They don't particularly want to keep any secrets about it. They just have an ideological possession to make everyone's life worse, effectively because they want revenge on the world. I mean, I wouldn't have said this stuff 2-3 years ago. I never thought I'd say that when I started my YouTube career, but this is effectively what they want. And they keep telling me, so I can't really ignore it anymore.
And in which hundreds of millions of people would be displaced from their homes.
This is another weird thing that the leftists do with this particular subject. All of a sudden, refugees are a bad thing. We constantly hear, oh, we need to just open the channel gates, just let every person who's coming over. We need to make a safe and happy home for them. And yet, then, when it's on this subject, all of a sudden refugees are a bad thing. Because whenever it comes down to the conversation on why are refugees coming here who aren't even from places where they're in danger, It's never about that. It's always just a vibes thing of, oh, well, they've made one of the most dangerous crossings in the world, which, no, actually, the channel is actually a relatively safe crossing. But anyway, once again, vibes. People are making this dangerous crossing, therefore they must have a desperate reason to come over here, when in reality they've paid some human trafficker £5,000, something like that, to hop on a dinghy to get over here. And, recent reports came out that it was like 80% men who've come over in the past few years. But, I mean, this is all besides the point. The point is that refugees are welcome here suddenly turns to, I don't want any refugees here because of the climate crisis whatsoever. And that's an even funnier point. Absolutely nobody coming over on the channel boats is even trying to lie about the climate crisis causing them to come over here. Literally nobody believes it. I don't think there's been a single case of a refugee coming over and saying, yes, I had to leave because of the climate crisis. They usually say something as pathetic as, I'm in debt. That's what Albanians are told to say, by the way. They come over, say that they're in crippling debt and they can't return to Albania because they'll get their legs broken or something. Total nonsense. But they don't try and say, oh, the sun was getting too warm and there was a drought. That has never been a reason for someone to come to Britain. And I'm not being funny, I don't see a reason why that will happen in the future. Again, we have technology and resources to actually deal with the issues that will come about from climate change. Especially if you do the sensible thing, keep the carbonised fossil fuels running as our energy source while we, build long-term solutions such as nuclear power plants. If you want your wind farms greens, you can buy the land and build it yourself.
If we want to avoid such a calamitous scenario, the question is not if we stop using oil and other fossil fuels, but when we do so.
See what I mean? It's unquestionable. There's nothing else we can do. We just have to stop oil and gas right now. And obviously we're going to run out of it someday, but we're nowhere near that day. We've been at peak oil for 40 years. America became a net exporter of fossil fuels under the Trump administration. Attempts to try and get renewables to replace it have only worked in certain countries where the population is so sparse you can actually have renewables work for that community. Scandinavia being the biggest example for that, but when it comes to densely populated islands such as, the UK, yeah, sure, renewables take up about a third of our energy production because it does get quite windy here, and amazingly we do get some sun over the summer. But ultimately that's all ended up working because there has always been fossil fuels to fall back on. Well, okay, I agree we only have a certain amount of time of extracting that stuff left. Why don't we follow in France's footsteps where they also have densely populated areas where they need nuclear power stations to power them? Why don't we do that? Well, because Nick Clegg says there's no point, it'll only be operational in 12 years. Well, luckily he said that 14 years ago.
And our speed or hesitancy here will have a direct link to how many lives we're able to save.
This is another topic I absolutely love when leftists bring up because I can just tell they've never looked into this. So, according to leftists, over time, obviously, the temperature has been rising and rising and rising, and that should directly correlate to the number of deaths. As we saw in the graph before, temperatures have been rising pretty consistently since, the Industrial Revolution. So let's take a look at the average number of annual deaths from natural disasters. Oh, look at that. It's falling. It's falling quite rapidly. I don't know what the hell happened in 1950. I don't know why that year's so low, but you can see the general trend. You have a very high number in 1920 dying to natural disasters, and that just plummets. 40,000 people, something like that, in the 2020s. That's pretty good. We're doing pretty well at saving people. And so I just don't see any evidence that we're going to end up with a massive amount of people dying. Droughts happen now. We're pretty good at the relief effort. If there's more droughts, we'll have more relief to give them, should we have the means to, which we will only have if we are able to grow our economy. And renewable energy only seems to work in certain areas for that. Big cities where you end up making most of your money due to either, financial systems or manufacturing or whatever, they tend to be the places that make the economic prosperity. They are the places that need an awful lot of power. Power that they cannot rely on the sun and wind for because they are too inconsistent. So either make nuclear power plants for them or carry on with oil and gas.
As things stand, neither government nor oil companies seem to be acting with all that much haste.
I absolutely hate this argument too, because that's just simply not true. Take Shell for an example. For years they put anything between 10 and 20% of their investment fund into renewables, and it's seen as a tragedy when it drops 3% to 11% in 2023. The reason it fell to 11% is because they made a loss in 2022. They made billions in 2023. You're probably going to see this number go up again, but to say that there's no haste for this is ridiculous. Every fossil fuel company is investing in renewable energy resources. The reason for this is incentives. They are subsidised for this. In some countries, they don't take an investment hit through taxation if they invest in renewables. And this is the problem. A lot of them are actually thinking of moving over to Norway because our taxes are so high. And in Norway, any investment whatsoever is not taxed. Whereas obviously we do here, and we are so mentally engaged with our net zero pledges that this is what we do. We actually make it impossible to grow the economy. As Keir Starmer's going to say on Tuesday, things are going to get worse before they get better. Apparently he's a clown decade enthusiast, but this is the thing. Everything has been a stranglehold on actual economic growth, and Labour aren't going to make it any better. I don't believe it's going to get better under Labour. I think they will be out before they even have a chance to make it better, because I think they're going to screw it up that badly. But point being, especially because this is in reference mainly to the UK, it is ridiculous to say oil companies and governments are not taking this seriously. They are taking it too seriously to the point where we've kneecapped ourselves.
So, can a ragtag bunch of British activists convince them to do so? Let's find out, I guess.
Yes, we know they do. Even the Tories, even Jenrick is going on about reaching net zero by 2050. Labour's biggest donor is Dale Vince, a climate crisis psychopath. It's absolutely nuts to say that climate change hasn't been taken seriously, quote unquote. I mean, I'd say it's not been taken seriously, but from the leftist point of view, it absolutely has been for years, and yet it will never be enough for them. Because at the end of the day, all of this is nothing to do with the climate. It is all to do with making other people's lives worse, because they are not happy with their own lives.
I am getting nervous now. And I'm just going along to kind of be there.
Well, you would be getting nervous, wouldn't you? You're doing something illegal. Again, this is kind of a criticism I have with the whole, these 5 climate activists were put in jail for 4 to 5 years. I think everyone involved in that Zoom call should be in jail. Because as far as I'm concerned, well, apart from the Sun journalist who exposed it, obviously, because as far as I'm concerned, everyone involved in that Zoom call was conspiracy to cause a public nuisance. A public nuisance that cost £1 billion in police resources and £700,000 in economic damages. Which, if you do any sort of criminal damage that ends up costing £1.75 million, obviously you're going to go to jail for a long time.
You're currently watching footage of me pacing around a hotel room in central London, absolutely bricking it.
See, this is what I mean. He's literally recording himself doing crimes. He cannot at all try and say, I'm just there as an independent journalist. Because if he was, he had absolutely nothing to worry about. But no, he knows that he is joining Just Stop Oil. And he knows that that risks jail time.
And the reason I'm so nervous is because the night before, I'd been given advanced knowledge of a, let's say, provocative event.
A crime. You were given advance knowledge of a crime, and you did not go to the police. That is conspiracy to whatever crime that is. You deserve to go to court.
Well, the plan for tomorrow is to go to the British Library and to do something disruptive which will attract attention.
Okay, at this point, not necessarily a crime. Not necessarily a crime at this point. It might turn into a crime, but just saying it will do something disruptive to get attention. You can do many legal things that end up in that situation.
I've just seen these. They look very new. It looks like they've never been used before. This is going to, I think, make quite an impression.
Yep, this is illegal. Having this footage and not showing it to the police in advance of this crime is conspiracy to commit that crime. Obviously, it's to commit criminal damage. Just for full context on the law, The offence of conspiracy, subject to the following provisions of this part of this Act, if a person agrees with any other person or persons that a course of conduct shall be pursued which, if the full agreement is carried out in accordance with their intentions, either will necessarily amount to or involve the commission of any offence or offences by one or more of the parties to the agreement, or would do so but for the existence of facts which render the commission of the offence or any of the offence impossible, he is guilty of conspiracy to commit the offence or offence in question. Now, British law is very, very annoying to read, so let me translate that. If you have prior knowledge and agree with the actions that will end up in the committing of a crime, you have effectively committed that crime. And again, having this footage and not sending it to the police before the crime is committed, and actually being there to record said crime, is implication that you agree with the actions. Therefore, you are conspiracy to the crime. So enjoy your time in court, Tom.
A few months previously, I got in touch with the folks at climate activist group Just Stop Oil, asking if they'd be up for participating in an interview for a video about disruptive climate protest.
Yeah, sure, that's fine, but I'm kind of wondering if you're going to push back on any of the claims they're going to make, because so far, all you've really said is that, yes, the climate crisis is absolutely real, which again, as I've gone through, it's that sensationalisation, and then when they've told you they're committing a crime, you've gone ahead with them to record said crime, making you a part of that crime. So again, trying to make out that you were being an independent journalist here, it's not going to fly. It's not flying with me, it's certainly not going to fly in court.
They offered me one better. The chance to follow along as a pair of activists tried to smash the glass casing surrounding Magna Carta.
Kind of blows my mind that he's just admitted there that yes, I was actually conspiracy to criminal damage. Like, again, there's moments in this video where he is trying to make out that he's just an independent journalist and he's just recording the facts, when it's up to a journalist to let the police know when a crime is going to be committed. You don't just get a shield of that under the guise of independent journalism.
Which seemed like it would be a pretty fun and interesting experience. Until the morning of.
Yeah, good. I'm glad you're nervous. You deserve to go to court. You deserve whatever punishment these two ladies got. I mean, I say this, they probably got away with it. They probably got away with the police caution, because we have a ridiculous system in the United Kingdom where effectively the only people that get treated harshly with the hammer of the law is working class white people. Everyone else seems to get away with it. Hell, the recent example was, I'm not going to put the video up on screen because it's, needlessly violent, but there was a woman, a waitress at Nando's, who got her face hit in by a plate that was hit in her face by a person of diverse origin, I suppose we could call him. And there was a whole hurrah on Twitter of her explaining exactly how the police treated this crime. Effectively, they just let the guy go, they watched the CCTV, they watched her get assaulted, and effectively said that there's nothing that they could do. And then when it went viral on Twitter, the Met Police had to reopen the case, because it's obviously ridiculous that a woman gets attacked and absolutely is nothing done about it. Jess Phillips, by the way, who constantly goes on about violence against women and girls, had absolutely nothing to say about the incident. These people, leftists, don't care about anything. It's all vibes-based, and it's all based on vices and, frankly, deadly sins. I suppose at the very least, Tom has a little bit of shame when it comes to partaking in this crime.
I am a bit worried about getting arrested just as accidentally as an accessory.
Accidentally an accessory? No, you're a conspiracist. You're part of the conspiracy to commit a crime. You're way worse than an accessory. You're a conspiracist.
The first thing I was worried about was timing. I'd been told that the action would be taking place around 10:30 AM, but it seemed a fair assumption that circumstances could develop quickly and the timings could shift.
Again, he said he was worried about being an accessory to murder. No, you even knew the time, down to the time they were planning to commit this crime. You are conspiracy to this. Why didn't you tell the police, Tom? Why did you not tell the police that a crime was going to happen?
The second thing I was worried about was that, amid all the commotion, I might end up accidentally getting arrested.
It wouldn't be an accident. This entire video so far has been you admitting you knew a crime and were in agreement with it and did not inform the police, and in fact wanted to record the crime to help spread the news that Just Stop Oil were once again committing a crime. You are conspiracy to this crime. It wouldn't be an accident. You deserve court time at the very least.
2 years previously, the Met Police had wrongfully arrested a press photographer who'd been taking photos of a JSO road blocking.
Yes, and once again, I hate the fact that independent journalists can use the independent journalist guise to effectively work with Just Stop Oil to help them promote their message. Once again, if you know a crime is going to happen, you are conspiracy to that crime. But once again, we have a bit of a two-tier system here, don't we? Again, you've got to bear in mind, there are people in Northern Ireland right now who are in a cell awaiting trial because they observed a riot. Now that is an unlawful arrest, because you're not involved with anything going on with criminality that day. You didn't know it was going to happen. In fact, the guy left as things started kicking off, and yet he was arrested because he was caught on CCTV in the area. Now that is an injustice. When it comes to photographers who are tipped off about this crime, they should absolutely be arrested for conspiracy. Because they know a crime's going to happen and they didn't do anything to stop it by informing the police. Of course you're conspiracy to commit the crime. You didn't do anything to stop it when you had prior knowledge.
Despite knowing I wasn't breaking any laws and having my press card ready to go in my pocket then, I was giving a lot of thought to how cautious I should be in trying to film the stunt.
Again, these things don't protect you. You were committing crimes. That's why you were so nervous beforehand. You were not nervous about being arrested because you saw in the news that it was an unlawful arrest. You know they're not going to arrest journalists even though you clearly committed a crime. I mean, honestly, if this worked in real life, then gangs would be carrying around press cards everywhere they go and then recording like murders on their camera and saying, oh, it's okay, officer, I'm just stabbing this guy for a TikTok because I'm an independent journalist. Like, that offence clearly doesn't fly.
The last thing I wanted was to be mistaken for actually being involved and having to try and talk my way out of things.
Tom, you are involved. You went along to them telling you the plan right down to the minute it was going to happen. You are involved.
As you'll know from the intro, that fear would later fade, and it would almost cause some problems.
Yeah, well, not enough, clearly, because you didn't go to court.
Would you mind deleting it if you don't mind?
I won't do that, I'm afraid.
Why is that?
Oh, because he's an independent journalist security guard. Don't you know that that means that he can do whatever he wants when he wants? I mean, to be fair to him, he's got absolutely no compulsion whatsoever to actually delete that footage. And to be honest, I don't know why the guard was even bothering. There would have been hundreds of people, well, not hundreds, tens of people with cameras there to capture the footage. It went viral almost instantly. It's quite pointless to actually get Tom to delete it.
But before we get to the action itself, who exactly are Sue, Judy and Just Stop Oil, and what is it precisely that they want?
Well, I consider myself an expert on this. Once again, Just Stop Oil are effectively a new branch of Extinction Rebellion. If you want to go into detail on what they actually want and what they actually do, go to my video reviewing their handbook. Effectively everything that Just Stop Oil do is derived from Extinction Rebellion. I mean, they've got the same co-founders, for God's sake. And when it comes to Tom's bits here, I'm only going to go through bits that he either gets wrong or I find funny. I mean, I might just skip the whole thing. Let's find out.
Politicians from both major parties here in the UK have condemned the group. The right-wing press have repeatedly tried to turn them into a national bogeyman, and a bunch of American teenagers on TikTok briefly became convinced that the whole thing was some kind of big oil-funded psyop intended to make climate activists look bad.
I mean, the right-wing press really didn't need to make them a bogeyman. Again, I really hate this attitude from leftists. Right-wing mainstream media is like 2 or 3 years behind the right wing itself. I really noticed this when I joined the Tory party and actually met members there. They are on board with quite a lot of things that are said on this channel, and even things said by, say, Sargon and other people in the right wing online. That's completely on board with it all. And they even have their own perspectives that an awful lot of people like Sargon haven't thought up of yet or have found yet. Like, a lot of them are very, very aware of what's going on in the world of politics. And again, the Daily Mail, Telegraph, right-wing press, whatever you want to call it, they're way behind on all this. They were a boogeyman. Extinction Rebellion was a boogeyman from day one. And it wasn't because the Daily Mail was calling them climate cultists. It's because people know how insane the left wing are, especially the far left wing, could see that they shut down entire cities and obviously think, I don't particularly want that in my society. It didn't take the Daily Mail telling them to hate them. They just hated them because they're idiots. And as far as I can tell, there's no evidence for big oil funding Just Stop Oil, but I honestly would not be surprised if they are. Because normies really do hate Just Stop Oil. They might say, oh, I agree the climate crisis is bad and what have you, but they absolutely hate the idea of all this disruption, and they really hate the idea of smashing up the Magna Carta.
My name's James Skeet. I'm a spokesperson for Just Stop Oil. Just Stop Oil is a direct action campaign taking action around the issue of oil and gas, originally oil and gas licenses in the UK, and now we've moved to a demand for our governments to work together to sign an international legally binding treaty to end the extraction and burning of oil, gas and coal by 2030.
Well, good luck with that. It's also worth bearing in mind that when the leftists say direct action, they effectively mean terrorism. Obviously, when it comes to Just Stop Oil, they are explicitly non-violent to the point where it's maddening. But hell, the reason they are zealously non-violent is because it gives them a better chance of succeeding in their goals. And as I say, generally it seems to be working. But, you know, trying to get a global contract signed to say no more oil and gas is going to be extracted, yeah, good one. Good luck trying to get the US, China and Russia to sign up to that, or India for that matter. It's not going to happen. And I'm not being funny, but when it comes to the UK, we are world leading when it comes to reducing our oil and gas emissions. And there's been absolutely no acknowledgement of that by Just Stop Oil. And so, as far as I'm concerned, they're not a serious campaign group. They are there just to cause a ruckus. And again, they have the plan for degrowth, which is just going to end in mass starvation. Anyway, we're going into a bit of a history of Roger Hallam now, and I was umming and ahhing whether to go through it, but I actually think it will be useful to see how mental he actually is all in one condensed video.
While these activists were the first to carry out an action in Just Stop Oil's name, the group itself had been founded a month or two earlier by these two, Roger Hallam and Indigo Rumbelow.
Yeah, and long story short, these two created Extinction Rebellion, which everyone will have heard of. You know all the disruption they did. And interestingly, Roger Hallam wanted to keep the Extinction Rebellion policies more radical, whereas most people basically just wanted a nice picnic in the middle of roads when they disrupted London, Manchester, whatever other city they found themselves in.
In many ways, Extinction Rebellion was a massive success. Just days after the group took over key strategic sites in London, the UK Parliament officially declared a climate emergency. With this success, however, came new challenges.
Yeah, effectively what happened was the government gave them an inch and they've been taking miles and miles ever since. And despite all the successes that the leftists and Extinction Rebellion should be celebrating, they don't celebrate any of it. I mean, Extinction Rebellion basically doesn't exist anymore. But Just Stop Oil, its ungodly devil child, they take absolutely no solace in the successes they've had. They have to keep thinking, like most leftists do, that they are the underdog, that they are constantly losing, to keep this rebellious streak in all of them alive. And amazingly, it seems to actually work, but that's because it's all based on vibes. They have good underdog vibes, which is very annoying because it keeps them very radical.
Some, including Roger Hallam, had wanted to take their disruptive tactics further. Specifically, Hallam had drawn up plans to fly drones within the airspace of London's Heathrow Airport, in the hopes that safety concerns would cause flights to be temporarily suspended.
And that actually led to his first stint in jail because, my god, aviation crime is taken ridiculously seriously in the UK, which is understandable because air disasters are they're quite deadly. I've double checked and he actually got a suspended sentence for this drone thing, but obviously carried on committing crime and went to jail for a bit. And the constant need to commit crime and end up in jail is kind of the whole point of what Roger Hallam's going for. A lot of Extinction Rebellion didn't want to do that because, as I say, they're just normies who are a bit left-wing and want to have a picnic in the middle of London, and so it ended up splitting the whole thing.
Hallam, however, remained committed to more radical action. During 2019, he trialled several splinter groups which tried to recapture the radical ethos of early XR. The first group, Heathrow Paws, attempted to go ahead with Hallam's drone plan, but were quickly arrested by the Metropolitan Police.
Yeah, probably because journalists that they invited realised that they'd be conspiracy to crime and then therefore told the police that a crime was going to be committed, and therefore not being conspiracy to that crime. Basically, I think they had a brain, Tom.
His next group, which he co-founded with Indigo Rumbelow, called Insulate Britain, undertook a campaign of road blockings in an attempt to persuade the UK government to fund better insulation for British homes.
And that actually died on arrival, because I think it turned out something like 80% of homes in Britain are already well insulated. So basically, again, this is absolutely nothing to do with the facts. This is nothing to do with climate change. The whole point is to disrupt people's normal way of life, because Roger Hallam hates that. And the problem with Insulate Britain is, well, obviously they were going for something that was not based in fact, but the reason he was going for a more, oh, we want to insulate people's homes, was to more say, oh, we need something that is going to directly benefit people. But obviously he then seemed to realise that actually we've done a pretty good job at benefiting ourselves when it comes to keeping warm, so yeah, it died a death. Insulate Britain, they had about 3 weeks and nobody cared for them. But again, you've basically just got a whole load of normies who are slightly left-wing who are happy to just act as minions in this sort of thing. Largely because our police system's a bit of a joke and doesn't arrest and punish them properly, because we don't build prisons anymore.
Nevertheless, it was Hallam and Rumbelow's second collaboration, Just Stop Oil, which would turn out to have the greatest sticking power.
Yeah, and that's basically because, you know, you've got a load of left-wingers with you. What's the best way to rile up left-wingers? Oh, rich people are doing bad things and ruining your life. If you can go along with that basic story, you've got a whole load of rabid left-wingers at your disposal.
Where XR had clung to 3 core demands, Just Stop Oil stuck to just one: that the UK government immediately halt all future licensing and consents for the exploration, development and production of fossil fuels in the UK.
Oh, well, Starmer's in and they got their demand. They're stopping all the new licenses. So why are they carrying on? I mean, to be fair to them, I suppose, this particular event was done before the recent election and before all the new oil and gas licenses were revoked, but they're obviously going to carry on, because this demand is constantly changing. Even as the spokesperson said when Tom was interviewing him, they've already changed the demand. At first it was Britain, no more new oil and gas licenses. Now it's, oh, we want every country in the world to sign a legally binding law that says that they will all do the same thing and stop all fossil fuel production by 2030. So this claim that there's one demand is just nonsense. You literally just had an interview with someone who told you there's more than one demand. Tom does this a lot, he just lies. Anyway, Tom explains where the main differentiation between Just Stop Oil and Extinction Rebellion come in their direct action.
Just Stop Oil began undertaking what it calls cultural actions. These involve activists throwing paint, powder, or most famously soup, over various famous landmarks, cultural works and sporting events.
Yeah, and all it appears to have done is really, really, really annoyed people. I mean, honestly, if I could swear I would, but I like that monetization. It really annoyed people. Made them irate. I've seen barely anyone I know in real life actually supporting Just Stop Oil. Even people who vote Greens. Like, they agree with Just Stop Oil that, oh, we need to stop all future fossil fuel production, but they absolutely hate Just Stop Oil because it basically it makes them look like lunatics because they agree with their core principle, which their core principle and demand is lunacy, but most people can accept it because a lot of people, because they're so relentlessly told about the climate crisis and read the sensationalised nonsense about it, that they believe, yeah, we need to stop all fossil fuel production. These people still drive cars, by the way. Anyway, because I don't like the way he structured this particular video. He keeps swapping between just talking about Just Stop Oil and then talking about the event, which I'm not going to lie, the build-up to this entire event is frightfully boring. If anything interesting happens, we'll go through it. If not, we'll go through the next section on Just Stop Oil.
Earlier than I had originally expected, however, I found myself pulled into the Magna Carta room.
Yeah, once again, just to remind everyone, that's because he knew a crime was going to happen, he was conspiracy to that crime, and he wanted to record it for Just Stop Oil. Yeah, once again, you should have been nervous because it would not have been a wrongful arrest.
The night before, I'd sat down with Sue and Judy for an interview, and they told me of the political significance of the document and how that had drawn them to using it as the focus of their stunt.
Yeah, people really like the idea of the Magna Carta because the spirit of the thing is effectively absolute monarchy is not a particularly effective form of government, and if people lower down the hierarchy feel like they're being treated unfairly, then there's a document there that says you can't be treated unfairly. That's the spirit of the thing. Exactly what it says is obviously a bit more complicated, but again, when you come to cultural icons, it's more the myth that people care about.
The exhibit itself only further stressed this significance. One sign touted it as a global symbol of freedom and rights.
Yeah, well, once again, there was a, as I believe it's been referred to before by one of my friends, there was a far-right uprising that involved violence and disruption that effectively forced King John's hand into signing off the Magna Carta, which gave the barons a hell of a lot more rights than they had before. Idiot leftists like to point out that it was rescinded the year after, but there are still clauses of the Magna Carta that were reinstated and are still enacted today. Can't remember the details of them, that doesn't really matter. Again, it's the myth of the thing that people care about. I am lower than you on the hierarchy, yet I am being treated unfairly. I will cause a ruckus until I feel like I am being treated fairly. And so it is quite ironic that when it comes to this, it's leftists smashing the idea of that up in pursuit of vibes. It is literally people who are higher up on the hierarchy, because they quite rarely actually get arrested and put in jail for committing these crimes, effectively trying to smash up a piece of legislation saying that the lower classes should be treated more fairly. These lower classes that tend to rely more on fossil fuels and those other things that you want to get rid of to make you feel better about yourself.
It did kind of feel like there was a sense of foreshadowing to all of this.
Yep, I sincerely hope that you do get imprisoned due to the laws of the land and by a jury of your peers. I hope they all say, yes, of course you were part of this crime, go right to jail. I hope that is the foreshadowing that happens in the entire story here.
Nevertheless, it did give a sense that this protest was part of a long history of activists using the document as a reference point in demanding political change.
They're not using anything in the document whatsoever, they're risking damaging it, that's all they're doing. They're not trying to enact any of the clauses from it. They don't even seem to really understand the whole spirit of the thing. The only reason they're going after it is because everyone knows what the Magna Carta is, they understand the spirit of the thing, and they want to try and damage that to get attention. That is it. Don't try and make it out like they're the barons fighting for their rights against King John. That is not what is going on here.
Then I saw them. Sat by the entrance to the treasures of the British Library room, Sue and Judy were waiting. Cool as cucumbers. Things were about to kick off.
Again, I know I'm labouring the point here, but he's conspiracy to criminal damage. He knows who is going to commit a crime. He can see them right there. He is recording them. He is doing nothing to try and stop them. He is doing nothing to inform someone that criminal damage is about to be committed. He deserves to go to court. He, at the very least, deserves some sort of punishment for this. I wouldn't be shocked if it's a fine or community service or something like that. But the point is, he deserves punishment for this. This is a crime. He is recording himself in the process of committing a crime. The act of recording this crime is a crime in and of itself. Not because he's recording the crime, but because he had prior knowledge of it and is literally saying in this video, these are two criminals about to commit a crime that I am doing nothing about. That is criminal.
But even with these historical precedents for using Magna Carta to make a political point...
Who used Magna Carta to make a political point by damaging it? That's not how Magna Carta has been used as a political point. God, you go back to when lockdowns were being reintroduced in Britain and people were being fed up with not being able to return to work. They started putting pictures of the Magna Carta saying, these are the clauses I enact. Effectively saying that I am a free person and you can't stop me going about my lawful business. To keep their livelihoods going. You know, barbershops was the main example that I can think of off the top of my head. They wanted to cut hair for money, and they were being stopped from doing that because of the government. So they said, right, Magna Carta, I am a freeborn citizen, subject of the king, queen at the time. You can't stop me going about my lawful business. That is enacting Magna Carta to make a political point. There's absolutely nothing here that's trying to enact Magna Carta. They're just trying to damage it because they want attention. As I said, they didn't say, we want to use Magna Carta as our example because of the symbolism of it, XYZ. It's just, no, everyone knows what it is. It's going to get attention and we just want attention. Stop making it out to be bigger than it is. You heard these people say exactly what I've just described. Don't start trying to make them smarter than they actually are, Tom.
What exactly was the goal here? On first glance, damaging an old document, or even chucking some powder over Stonehenge, might seem like a slightly odd way to try and bring about government action on the climate crisis. Whether one agrees with it or not, however, Just Stop Oil do at least have a logical explanation for how they think this might provoke change.
Again, this is all covered in my video on Extinction Rebellion's handbook. Just to give you the too long didn't watch synopsis of it. Effectively, they want to absolutely jam up the justice system with these criminals, including the 2 women and Tom, who committed criminal damage, because eventually it's basically just going to be cheaper to actually give in to their demands than to actually keep jailing them. That's kind of the whole point. But once again, Tom's going to go into detail. If there's anything interesting, we'll go through it. Take it away.
The point about the Magna Carta is, of course, it's about ancient freedoms and, going against oppression and taking away the power of the rich and powerful.
I guess kind of, but it is quite funny for this woman to be perfectly free, sat on her sofa, oppressed by nothing. There is no oil company, there is no government that is oppressing her at the moment. A complete misuse of the myth of Magna Carta. Effectively, the Baron's main issue was King John was an awful king, kept going to war with France and losing, costing them absolutely loads of money in taxes, and effectively they got fed up with it and said, no, this is absolutely horrendous. We now get to say over the law of the land. Effectively, if enough of them get together, they can veto the king's decision. Taxes from us, I believe they only allowed taxes from them if one of the king's sons was getting married, and then a couple of other caveats that allowed for taxes to be raised. Otherwise, it was a basic fealty to the king, obviously. Again, the whole myth of it is the end of despotic rule. Obviously, after it was rescinded and reinstated a few times. But that was the whole myth of it. It ended despotic rule. Who has despotic rule over Britain? The civil service, if you're based, but basically nobody.
See, the core principle established by Magna Carta was that the King of England had to abide by the law of the land in the same way that everybody else does.
That was certainly a clause of it, but, it's called the Magna Carta or the Great Charter for a reason. There was quite a lot in it.
These days, that same principle applies to the British government.
Okay, and what laws are they break? Well, okay, individually, a lot of them do break a lot of laws. But what exactly is Just Stop Oil saying that they're criminals for?
The ruling party might change the law by passing legislation in Parliament, but it can't simply make things up as it goes along.
Actually, technically, Parliament can do that. That's the whole point of Parliament being sovereign. It's just very difficult to do that when you've got decent checks on how Parliament works. That's why you have 2 houses, and that's also, in theory, why you have the king who actually gives it royal assent. You have these 3 separate checks on power, and effectively you get sensible laws through. Obviously, with all the reform over the 20th century, that has been quite bastardised, but it still works all right.
This has had significant consequences for progress on climate action.
See, the UK's Climate Change Act currently commits the government to reducing the nation's carbon emissions by 2/3 by the year 2030.
Oh dear, are you going to try and claim that they're nowhere near that? Because they're actually pretty close to that.
It sets that out not as a vague ambition, but as a legal obligation.
I mean, this is the ridiculous thing with the Climate Change Act. Who the hell do you arrest? Who goes to jail for this? This is what a lot of people have a problem with when it comes to recent goings-on in Parliament. A lot of acts are basically just there to virtue signal, and this is absolutely one of them. Oh, it's legally binding. Okay, who goes to jail if it's not reached? Everyone who was in government? Everyone who was a minister? What does the Secretary for Culture have to do with climate change?
And every 5 years, the government has to publish a so-called Carbon Budget Delivery Plan, which sets out exactly how it intends to hit that target.
What a colossal waste of time and money. This is why our taxes are so high, by the way. Because you've got people on an Excel spreadsheet effectively just putting stuff in, saying, oh, how can we reduce carbon dioxide this year? This is money that could be going towards nuclear programs, for God's sake.
The most recent plan, however, was pretty questionable. It relied heavily on unproven technologies such as carbon capture.
I mean, carbon capture is only unproven because it's so expensive. The theory of it makes perfect sense. You take carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and you push it underground. How is that not taking emissions out of the atmosphere? And by the way, carbon capture and storage was something that Extinction Rebellion was demanding when they were first initiated, by the way. Carbon capture storage was something being pushed by the Greens years ago, but they moved away from it because the Tories started adopting it. That's the only reason they don't want it anymore, is because it's a Tory plan now. And in fact, they hate it even more because, obviously, it's going to keep... Again, it's all down to envy. It's going to keep fossil fuel companies rich because it doesn't actually stop them from digging up fossil fuels. The thing is that you dig up fossil fuels and then you've got an empty reservoir, effectively. Just pump CO2 down there. Like, they can literally do it themselves for... You know, it's still expensive, but relatively cheap for digging a new hole to put this carbon dioxide into. But yeah, that's the main reason they don't want it. Because it allows these companies to still exist. Again, this is all down to envy.
A process through which carbon is essentially sucked back out of the air after it's been emitted.
It can also be captured at the point of burning the fossil fuel. And we do actually have the technology to capture the carbon dioxide. Again, the problem is that it's expensive.
In response, two environmental charities took the government to court, and less than a fortnight prior to Sue and Judy's trip to the British Library, the UK's High Court found the plan to be unlawful.
Oh my god, no way, what happened? Was someone arrested?
Sue and Judy were therefore partly attempting to draw attention to this ruling.
It's so funny to think about. We're oppressed because the government broke the Climate Change Act 2008. Oh, how'd they do that? Oh, well, carbon capture and storage is a little bit iffy. That's the story here. We are enacting Magna Carta because carbon capture storage might not be as effective as the government thinks.
At the same time, Magna Carta's establishment of the right to a fair trial allowed them to use the action to protest what they would likely argue are excessive legal crackdowns on climate activists.
Well, the crackdowns that have ended up with millions of pounds worth of disruption. And I'm not being funny, but these people go to trial. They have their fair trial. It's not like they just get sent straight to jail and sentenced to 5 years. No, you had a whole process of sending them to court.
It's worth saying, however, that not all of what Just Stop Oil describe as cultural actions are designed to have such specific connotations.
Yeah, but again, even these specific connotations were stupid. I mean, unironically, try saying I'm oppressed because of the 2008 Climate Change Act not being properly followed by the government. No one's going to take you seriously on that point.
And compared with Magna Carta, however wonderful it is as a piece of our history and to be protected, it is of no comparative value compared with the extinction of the human race, for instance.
Things like this need to be challenged, Tom. The extinction of the human race. You know, you bring up at the start, oh, the UN says this, that and the other on climate change, which we go through and it turns out it's because they're being screwed with stats once again. And the problem with that is that then everyone thinks, oh, facts that are brought up, they're going to be corroborated by the UN. There is no UN report that thinks that humans are going to be extinct. The most that they say is that there's going to be disruption in some areas of the planet that is going to maybe cause a bit of a migration or refugee crisis. And again, they're not even certain of that. They range from being 10% sure on something to 90% sure on something. And guess what? The better case scenarios they are more sure on. So let's not go mental with it. Humans are not going to be extinct because the planet increased in temperature by 2 degrees. Especially given we've lived in similar climates to that in the past. Well, I'm present.
But they're primarily designed to ensure the climate crisis remains in the news as much as possible.
Yeah, well, they manage that, don't they? It's the reason I made a channel, because the climate crisis news is all nonsense. Well, it's not all nonsense, to be fair, but an awful lot of it is poorly reported.
Political activists like to talk about theories of change.
Again, it's in my Extinction Rebellion handbook video. It's as I said before, they keep committing crimes, they keep this sort of thing in the news. Eventually, someone in power has to react to it. The thing is, they've been reacting to it for decades now, and they're still not taking it as a win, meaning this thing's only going to get worse.
It's been like decades of people signing petitions and sad pictures of polar bears on, like, you know, on an ice cube or something. Like, it's we've been seeing that for like decades now, so I think that's why civil resistance has come into play here. Now the street movement is happening.
See what I mean? There's absolutely no acknowledgement of what's actually going on in the real world. She brought up polar bears. Since 2004, we've been told that polar bears' numbers in Western Hudson Bay have been steadily declining, but a new study made public in 2023 reveals that this isn't actually true. In the State of the Polar Bear report, published by the Global Warming Policy Foundation on International Polar Bear Day, zoologist Dr. Susan Crockford provides the details on this explosive news. Among other issues addressed in this year's report, Crockford explains that the population survey of West Hudson Bay polar bears completed in 2011, 16 and 2021 generated lower estimates than a survey done in 2004. However, these differences in bear counts are not statistically significant from each other, which means that there have been no negative trend during the last 20 years. And in fact, if you read the title, it turns out that the polar bear population has actually tripled from the 60s to 2023. In other words, polar bears are doing really, really well. So these sad pictures of polar bears on an ice cube, yeah, total nonsense. It's going really well, and none of these activists care, because it's not about the climate. Anyway, we're now going to go into a history of activism in the UK. I hope he's not going to say anything stupid on this point.
The suffragettes who won women the right to vote.
Oh dear God, never mind. Again, the women's right to vote probably will have come into effect much earlier if the suffragettes never existed. To even try and claim they were peaceful is just total nonsense, but apparently the leftists want fascist sympathisers to be seen as heroes in the modern day.
The Freedom Riders who challenged segregation on public transport in the US.
Sure, I think there's no denying that that was a peaceful activism.
These groups didn't bring about change through asking nicely, but through sustained campaigns of highly disruptive direct action.
Yes, the same is true of Indian independence. Gandhi wanted independence, was famously non-violent in his activism, and, well, India is now independent. Anyway, Tom then goes into the details of Roger Hallam's finding while doing a PhD in something stupid like public disobedience or something like that. And effectively, this is what Roger Hallam made his life. He couldn't cut it as an organic farmer, so effectively wanted to ruin everyone else's life.
Firstly, actions have to be disruptive. Preferably, they should break the law.
And that is exactly why I think Just Stop Oil and most other groups that Roger Hallam's in must be prescribed by the state. Because they are literally groups that are only there to commit crime. Why are we allowing a group that is only there to commit crime to exist?
According to Hallam, law-breaking and the arrests which follow show those in power that a movement is serious and committed enough to suffer for its beliefs.
Yes, and it certainly does paint the picture that they're serious about the beliefs, which I think is a massive issue, because again, they don't really believe in this climate change malarkey. Most of them are seen driving around in cars, for God's sake. Again, realistically, this is all down to envy and basically not wanting people to be normal. That's effectively what this comes down to. No one is allowed to make money, no one is allowed to live in modern society because we hate it.
Arrests also create what Hallam calls social tension. They force non-activists in politics, the media and everyday life to engage with the issue at hand in a much deeper way than they otherwise might.
Yeah, and then you get people like me who point out that the issue is basically a non-issue. You get people like Bjorn Lomborg, Matt Ridley, other people that are massively on this climate change issue and constantly point out that there's no climate crisis. Yeah, things are going to get worse, but we actually have the means, especially if we grow our economy, to overcome all these downsides to fossil fuels. And obviously we have plans to slowly move away from them. There's plenty of policy that we can do to mitigate that. But again, it's that meme of, I don't want a solution, I just want to complain. And that's all Just Stop Oil and Extinction Rebellion are. A man couldn't succeed in organic farming and effectively managed to move a small army of people to complain to absolutely everyone in Britain that they aren't happy with their lives. That is effectively what is happening here.
Secondly, actions have to be high profile. They need to be concentrated in places where both politicians and the media will notice.
Yes, this incidentally also causes the most damage. That's why a lot of them end up in jail.
Thirdly, all actions have to be non-violent and remain that way.
Yeah, the main reason for that is just because it manages to hang on to the little bit of social sympathy that they actually have. Instead of people being scared of this group, instead, effectively they see them on the news and think, oh god, it's those idiots again. Which again, I don't know which is worse as an activist group, to be hated or to be laughed at. Because I think a lot of people see them with disdain, but I don't think they hate them. I think they just want them out of the way, which I think is way worse than being hated. Because I think people will take you more seriously if you end up being hated, but I'm not saying that they should be violent here, by the way. I'm glad they're not violent, but I really think that the general public would be happy to actually see, even though these people are being non-violent, to effectively see them being dealt with the same way Germany and France are dealing with them. Germany and France don't have the same issue with Just Stop Oil we have, because frankly we're soft on crime.
JSO are evidently willing to engage in property damage and trespass.
Property damage is a form of violence, by the way. It should be mentioned. When they say no violence, they mean against other people. And it's also worth mentioning at this point that one time Roger Hallam literally stopped a podcast series on its feet, literally in the first episode, because he kept doubling down on saying, I want an ambulance to effectively not make it to a hospital and so someone dies, so that people will talk about Just Stop Oil. Roger Hallam is a mentalist, is all you really need to know here.
But they view violence to be completely beyond the pale.
Once again, violence against people. Intimidatory tactics, I guess we could call them, but to be honest with you, disrupting all these sporting events, spraying paint on property and planes, things like that, they are intimidatory actions. There is an intimidation factor to this. It's obviously not as intimidatory as literally punching someone in the face or threatening to, but it is still supposed to cause more money to be spent on security, because they want to end up to be cheaper to just do the climate policy that they want rather than keep locking them up or pay for security.
Their commitment to this is deep. They know they're about to be, at best, shouted at a lot, and at worst, physically assaulted. They thus go to great lengths to calm themselves, to the point they can override the very powerful natural instinct in such scenarios to respond.
No, these people are pathetic, meek weasels. These people do not have a natural response to fight back. Fight Club covers this. Effectively, we're so civilised that we don't really know how to fight back. And this is especially true for all these middle to upper middle class morons who are just sitting in the middle of a road. They don't know how to fight back. It's not within their instincts. If they don't have a flight or fight response, they just have a flight response. The thing is that they know they're not going to get attacked because they know they have police protection from that. Which again is why people constantly say, we have a two-tier justice system. Because an awful lot of the time these people block roads and they're barely arrested. Yet someone pushes them out of the way to, help an ambulance get through or something, or they want to get to work because, they'll starve otherwise, and all of a sudden they will be taken away by police. It's absolutely ridiculous to try and think these people are the underdogs. Absolutely ridiculous.
Finally, successful activism has to be sustained. Day after day, Hallam's quite fond of saying.
Yeah, I've covered Roger Hallam enough. Effectively, keep the pressure on, don't be violent, make it high profile, and that's the best way to succeed. And as I say, seems to be basically working. They've had everything they've won. As we went through before, they are literally making that 2008 Climate Change Act, which apparently was what the protest was about, that's actually being implemented. We're actually reaching that target, 2/3 by 2030, whatever. Basically there already. But they don't care. It is not about the climate, it is about lashing out at society because they don't like it.
The ultimate goal is to become such a headache for the government, such a massive pain in the arse, that it simply becomes easier for politicians to act on the climate crisis than it is to continue to process all the arrests and court cases and controversy that activists are causing.
Yes, well, there's quite a big issue with that, in that, well, effectively people are going to vote more and more and more for people to actually deal with these people rather than give in to their demands. People are fed up with them. The Greens, yeah, they did slightly better this election. That's mainly because a lot of leftists did not trust Keir Starmer as they shouldn't. Keir Starmer got about the same votes as Labour got, I think, under Gordon Brown in 2010. Labour did not do well. The left generally didn't do well. It's just that the right didn't do well either and was split by Reform. As time goes on, though, I can see Reform getting more and more support because Tories have not learned their lessons. They're moving more and more left and don't take the main issues seriously. So, sure, you're going to get the government annoyed at you and just enact climate policy. They've been doing that for years. You don't stop. Everyone knows you don't stop, partially because of people like me, but a lot more because basically of GB News. Getting people on who support Just Stop Oil or Just Stop Oil activists, spokesmen, whatever, and they're mental. Completely crazy. No arguments in their head whatsoever. They are just there as either overgrown teenagers or senile old fools, effectively saying, you're all going to destroy the planet, I am the saviour, I am the messiah, I am part of this group that is going to save your life. No one buys it. And so people are going to want more draconian laws on these types of protests because everybody hates them. And frankly, they're justified. You are stopping people going around their lawful business, and that was frankly the point of the Magna Carta, to let barons go about their lawful business without the king making it worse for them. Anyway, that was part 1. We will carry on with part 2 some point this week, not exactly sure when. In terms of streams, tomorrow it's Tosh Talks. We're getting a panel on to talk about our schoolboy days because, well, we all want to depress ourselves. Regional Variations is still TBD. Hopefully it'll be back Wednesday. If not, hopefully back another Wednesday soon. And Friday, it is the 100th episode of Laughing at the Guardian. I have a whole panel of Warman invited. It's going to be a good time, and I hope to see you all there to help us celebrate. But with that, that's everything I had for you today. Once again, subscribe, become a member, share this video with everyone who cares. It really does help the channel, helps me grow, and hopefully soon I'll be at 10k subs. That is the goal for the end of the year. And I would absolutely love it if you share my channel about and get me to that goal. Right, anyway, as I said, that's everything I had for you today. So once again, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.